Welcome to the Childfree Wealth Podcast, hosted by Bree and Dr. J, Certified Financial Planner. Here we discuss life and finances as it relates to being child-free. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please consult your advisor before implementing any ideas heard on this podcast.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners. Today, we're going to dive back into that No Baby Step 7, planning for your parents and how do you care for them. And I've got an awesome person joining us. Beth Pinsker is a certified financial planner, and she's a financial planning columnist at MarketWatch. But she's got a new book coming out called My Mother's Money, A Guide to Financial Caregiving, coming out in November. And we're going to dive into what is it like to care for your parents and how does it work? But the other thing I want you to keep in mind are these are all the steps you need to figure out somebody to care for you. We'll give you information at the end, but don't forget we're launching our new Child-Free Trust service, so we will be there to help you to fill in some of these roles for those of you that don't have somebody step in. So Beth, I read this story. I read about your mom, and I was telling you beforehand, I've been caring for my mother off and on since I was 16. This is one of those things that just tugs at your heartstrings. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was thinking about this just a second ago. People are child-free, but you're never parent-free somehow. You have to come from somewhere. And there are going to be people who brought you up in this world, whether they're your parents or some other kind of guardian. And at some point, the roles reverse, and you have to look after them or be a part of their lives in some way, no matter what the relationship was when you were growing up. It's just something we all face.
It is. And for our child-free clients, we often get you don't have kids, so you can take care of mom. It's like a sentence they just finish that way. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. And particularly those people who are single with no kids, it's you can move back with mom. And it's no, I don't necessarily have to, but it's a choice. But it is a reality. And the way I look at it is your parents' planning or lack thereof can have more of an impact on your own financial and life plan than your own planning. Does that make any sense?
No, absolutely. Because you can do all the things right for yourself, and then a parent needs you, and suddenly your retirement is derailed, your current spending is derailed, your time is derailed. It all goes right out the window when somebody else needs you. So if you've chosen a life where you're not caring for a baby or a child that's growing up, you have in the end, the responsibility for a parent who's sort of going in reverse anyway. I don't know. I was talking about this with a friend the other day, and I said, what are your choices? You can give your parents money or you can watch them starve. Are those really choices? I don't understand the philosophy where you set boundaries or you have your limits and things like that, because what are your options? You have to do it. I don't see any other choices in the matter. When my mom needed me, I was whatever, count me in.
See, I'm going to challenge you there. I do think there is a limit to how much you can help other folks. This is put on your oxygen mask first before helping others. I mean,
yes, obviously that. But in terms of, you don't want to bankrupt yourself, but you can get your parents into the kind of care they need or get them the kind of care they need through services if you have to. And a lot of people I've talked to are hesitant about spend down to Medicaid and things like that. And I talked to somebody for my book who is a well-to-do financial planner, presumably well-to-do. I don't know anything about his finances, but he had to help his parents at the end of their lives and had to put them on Medicaid to get them into nursing homes. And that was part of the financial caregiving he was doing, was getting them, into a place where they would be safe for memory care and get them on Medicaid when the time came, do what he could in the meantime to help them till they got to that point.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, it's Bree. I highly encourage you to schedule a Childfree Wealth checkup. During this time, you're going to get a couple of forms to fill out that include your life and financial plan. We'll review them, and then we're going to have a meeting and go through them with you. We're going to give you some advice and things to work on and talk through things to make your finances simpler so your life can be amazing. You can schedule yours by going to our website, childfreewealth.com, and clicking the Schedule Now button.
I think that's fair. I think that, there's ways to support within what your boundaries are. It's my wife and I say that nobody lives with us. We couldn't handle somebody living with us. It just doesn't work, no matter which side of the family. but we'll care for people in other ways. I mean, there are ways to set boundaries to protect you, protect your life, and take care of your parents.
Yeah, I have this example in my book from a financial therapist, and it was what her mother did with her grandmother, the therapist grandmother. They didn't. Her mom and her grandmother didn't have a good relationship when they were growing up, and her mom didn't want to get sucked into her grandmother's drama. She said, "Look, I will keep your lights on, but that, and keep you fed, but that's where I draw the line. I will take you to doctor's appointments. You will not live here." Like she put in place, what she would do and was very clear about it. And she had to do that for her own mental sanity because, like, not all parents were perfect and not all children were perfect and not all relationships are the best, even later in life. And people still need care. And you have to, cross that bridge when you come to it. And no care situation also stays the same. So I talked to one man who was caring for his father, and they had a terrible relationship when he was growing up. He would get beaten. His father was unstable. He was a Vietnam War veteran with PTSD. And then his father hit the dementia stage and he changed as a human being. And he was no longer the, combative, negative force. And the man had grown up and he had had his troubles, but he was, in a different place in his life. And so when he took over caring for his father, they had a different relationship. It was like a whole new thing. It changes over time.
It does. And I think there's a role reversal that is hard, where you go from being the kid to being the parent of your parent, which sounds weird, but that kind of is what you're doing.
It is. And I hated it. I got to tell you, that was like the worst part for me because my mom didn't have any cognitive problems. She had a spinal problem and she got spine surgery and then got an infection and then went downhill from there. And so she had her faculties the whole time, but was basically bedridden and in pain and kept having complications. I just wanted her to be in charge. She was the most competent, functional, rational human being I've ever encountered in my life. And I was just used to ceding all authority to her because she was better at everything. And if you had a question about anything, you could just call her up and she would know the answer. And it was really hard for me to be the one pulling the strings and making the decisions, not having her to ask questions to all the time because she wasn't feeling well that particular day or was cloudy from the medicine or what have you. And I really didn't like that. And the biggest place where that impacted me was with the caregivers because I hated being the boss of them. I hated managing the staff. I know on previous podcasts, you've talked about hiring a care manager. I wish we would have had the funds to do that. We never even really looked into it because I just assumed that we couldn't afford it. But I really didn't want to be handling the schedule and the personalities and there was a rivalry between our caregivers. They were all fighting for power and it just got overwhelming and they all got burned out and I didn't like that whole management process and I would have liked to have had somebody else manage that. And my mom was very good at managing a household and could have managed them, but she was caught in the emotional drama of it all too. They had a fight one day. She had a fight with one of the caregivers one day about whether she could lie down after she had eaten in her hospital bed. And the caregiver wanted her to sit up for a certain amount of time to help her digestion. And my mom wanted to lie down. And they were literally going at it, screaming at each other. I walk in and I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And then I had to sit each of them in separate rooms till they cooled off and then go talk to each one separately and then go back and forth and negotiate, a settlement between the two of how we would go forward with the sitting up or lying down after meals. It was not at all what I wanted to be doing.
Yeah, by the way, I don't think anyone wants to be doing it. And we do encourage, if you have the resources, to build a care team around it. And this is one of those where it gets interesting. We'll often suggest to our clients that they hire an aging care manager to take care of their parents, to be their eyes and ears, to be that person to do the fights, to be there for them, even if they have to pay for it out of pocket, just because of the amount of stress and other things, which is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. I wonder how that works when you're a solo ager and you hire a care manager for yourself. If there's any sort of cognitive decline involved, how do you manage that once the cognitive decline sets in?
Yeah, that's actually why we're launching the service Childfree Trust. So we've partnered with a trust company and we're going to serve as child-free people's medical power attorney, financial power attorney, executor, and trustee so that we are the one managing the aging care manager based on the solo person's plan. So they set the plan. This is our care plan. This is what we want. And then we're the ones that are managing the care manager. And the care managers are really good at advocating for you, where, that is part of their skill set, which is exactly what you just had to say, what you were doing for your mom.
Right.
Like, that's the hard part is like, if you don't have somebody do it for you, who does it?
Right. And I think that's where planning, people don't like to think about this sort of thing until it's too late. But if you don't think through all of the operations while you're mentally able and you're aging solo, there's nobody to make those decisions for you and get really stuck. And then you become a ward of the state. Like, I don't know. You really have to think about these things ahead of time. And one thing that's always, I wrote a story about this earlier this year, is that the most charitable people are single women. Mm-hmm. Because they are forced to think about the rest of their lives while they're still able to. And once you start thinking about, what's going to become of me, your charitable instincts kick in. You realize that you have to say something on paper if you want to give money away to particular causes before you die, because it doesn't happen by default. So single women are the best at thinking ahead in that circumstance. And I think that's really admirable. I think the headline of that piece was something like "Single cat ladies are going to save the world," because that's a core demographic of our country right now, is women who are aging alone because their partners or whoever was taking care of them has gone ahead of them. And women have longevity. And that's where people are going to end up, whether they were previously married or not. It's just the way demographics are going.
It is. I mean, about 25% of the U.S. are child-free, and about 1/3 of child-free folks will never marry. And then you get the ones that are widowed or separated or whatever else it is. So it's a huge issue. And it all gets kind of smushed together, So like with this discussion around caring for your parents, like, well, you're single, no kids, you can move in with mom. And that is just such a hard choice to make. Did you end up living with your mom for this?
I wanted to. My boyfriend and I started look at places to move her to in New York because I just couldn't go back and forth anymore. And because my mom didn't have a real diagnosis or anything in particular that was wrong after the surgery, it was just like one catastrophe after another. We thought she was eventually going to get better and live a long time. She was only 76. And so we had no idea how to plan because we didn't know what the trajectory of the illness was. If she had had cancer or another thing with a terminal diagnosis, we might have been like, okay, you've got 6 months left to live. Let's do it this way. But we had no idea. She could have lived another 20 years. We don't know. And we didn't know at that point and couldn't keep going back and forth. I have a job. I've got kids. I needed her to be in a place where I could, have better access to her. So we went to look at apartments in New York that could fit the, 5 of us in some sort of logical arrangement. And then she said no to that. And then then she got sicker and I looked into nursing homes where I could bring her. I was like, okay, well, how about we set you up either an apartment by yourself with a caregiver where it's nearby and has an elevator, or I'll find a nursing home where you could go that's nearby. And I found one right on the grounds of my daughter's high school. And I'm like, my daughter can go to school and then walk over and sit with you in the afternoon and you can help her with her homework. And then I'll come over and give everybody dinner. And then we'll go, I'll take my kid home for the evening. I thought it was the most ideal situation. And then my mom was like, nah, I don't want to go anywhere. I think she knew what was happening. I wasn't living in her body and I didn't know how it was going to go, but I think she did. And she just sort of put her foot on the brake for a while. And then by the time we got around to talking about it again, it was, hospice and it went pretty quickly. I think that the whole living together thing, I mean, my stories and things that I've covered in the past and people I've talked to, like that hasn't gone well in a permanent sense. Like people have had their parent come and live with them. And then, if it's a memory care situation or whatever, it's too hard and you end up putting them in a facility. I had one friend who was the youngest of, I think, 7 brothers and sisters. And he got not the short straw. Like he was like, I'll retire and I'll go live with mom and I will be her caretaker. Like I'll take early retirement and I'll go and do it. And he went down there and he had a heart attack and he died and he predeceased her. And I just thought, that's sad. He was expecting to fulfill his familial duty and then like enjoy his retirement. And it all got cut short. And that to me, I don't know about that. Like that's a hard decision to make and you're giving up a lot.
Yeah. And I think if you plan ahead, there's ways to do it. You know, a lot of the work now done with like accessory dwelling units, other things like where mom can have her own place behind you or dad or whatever else it is. And you guys still have your independence. There's some ways to do it. What I always watch out for is, hey, mom slipped and fell, broke her hip, moves in with you while she's rehabbing. And then you get like a year later and you're like, Mom, are you ever going to move back out? Like, you're fine now. Mom's like, this is great. Like, I'm loving this. Like, and it's like, I don't plan on you living with me for the next 20 years. This was like a 6-month thing. Not like, it's hard to plan.
It is very hard to plan. You never know what the next turn is. You know, things change constantly. And I can't emphasize that enough because the more you plan, the more things change. It's just, you have to keep on your toes. You have to have options, which is where savings comes into play because you really do need a really robust emergency fund. You need to be planning for sickness and for death. And you need to just have enough on hand and enough flexibility to keep all your options open.
Hey listeners, we have some exciting news to share with you. This podcast is getting a new name and a refresh hosting lineup. Beginning January 1st, the show will relaunch as Childfree Life by Design, brought to you by Childfree Insights. You're still going to hear from the hosts you know, and we're also going to be introducing new voices with expertise in different areas of the Childfree experience. Our mission is the same, to give you clear, practical guidance to help you build the child-free life you want. And this change lets us serve you even better. Nothing is going to change on your end. Stay subscribed, and the new episodes will continue to land right in your feed. We can't wait to share what's coming in the new year.
Yeah, and I think this is where I suggest for our clients, while your parents are healthy, to do what we call a parent checkup, which is like, what is their financial situation? Do they have long-term care insurance? What are their means? And what we find is that when you dive in with your parents, they're either broker than you thought or richer than you thought. Yeah. There's like nobody in the middle. Like, I mean, like you look at this aging population, it is split hard. And then you can make some decisions about what you can do versus not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And the part of my book that most people have been interested in is the part about power of attorney and how that plays in versus joint accounts versus being joint on somebody's deed. Like all the decisions you make about financial access before somebody gets sick and dies. I don't think people realize, I don't know like how many people you deal with realize that like, you know, I give you power of attorney. Like you sign even when you get to the point where people download the form or get it from a lawyer and they sign it, they think that they have declared that person the power of attorney. And all you have to be is like on the phone with somebody and you say, hey, I'm power of attorney for my mother. And that's the end of the story. That's like the beginning of the story. And it's a bad nightmare, you know, horror story. And I was just going through this with my boyfriend's parents, and I did it for myself. I didn't even understand how it worked. You go to the bank to set it up, you know, like you have to take that power of attorney document. It's just pieces of paper until you take it to the institution you want to interact with. And then you have to follow their rules. And all of their rules are different. The banking system is just a mess with this stuff. And it takes multiple appointments on multiple days and multiple steps. And, you know, you're mailing documents to P.O. boxes that, you know, boyfriend went to take the power of attorney to the post office, and they told him that the P.O. box that he addressed it to didn't even exist. And it's just so many hoops. It's so much easier if you can walk in with the person that you want to take care of and get that power of attorney enacted because they are much, much better with you. I went without my mom because she was already sick. And I needed access to her main checking account. They literally just said no to me. If you don't know your rights, you don't know when to stand your ground. And you're going to get pushed around. And so I said, no, this is a perfectly legitimate power of attorney, and you have to accept it. And I interviewed one lawyer for my book who had to sue a bank in order to get them to accept the power of attorney. And it's a hard road. But you just have to be like, no, this is absolutely what I need to do. It's legal. It's fine. You need to eventually take it. So I'm just going to stay here until you take it. But that's only if you're right. This is where planning comes in. If you are not right, if you do not have a proper power of attorney, if your parents wrote out the power of attorney in Pennsylvania and they now live in Florida, if they wrote it out 15 years ago when they did their will and it's no longer valid because the state rules have changed, if you're not possessing of that proper document, they won't talk to you and they will be relentlessly stubborn about it the same way that you have to be. And you're wrong. You're in the wrong. You're going to have to do something to fix it. And that something that you have to do is go to court in order to get named guardian of your parent. And I've been told from my book, the reporting I did, the going rate for that's about $18,000.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
It's not cheap. It takes hours preparation, paperwork. You need a lawyer. You need to go to probate court. It takes a while, depending on your state, to get a hearing. Then you got to go to multiple hearings, and then you got to go to follow-up hearings. Because once you're named guardian, it doesn't stop. You have to go for follow-up visits because it's a fiduciary responsibility, and you're held to account. As a guardian, you have to provide updates to the court, and all of those you have to bring a lawyer to. So that's more time for a lawyer who's charging probably $300 an hour, depending on where you live. In New York, it's going to be much, much more than that. And it's emotionally draining. Probate court is no place that you want to be. It's just not, especially when you have a sick person that you're trying to help. The same goes for yourself. If you're on your own and you're planning on what you're going to do to care for yourself if you would get sick or anything would happen to you, you need to make sure that you've gone to the bank and got your power of attorney to accept their rights, their responsibilities, and enact them with the financial institutions and make sure they understand what it is they're doing and what they need to do. And that's where a professional trust service would come in handy, because you don't know when that's going to happen. I have a friend who's asking me to be that person for her. I'm her youngest friend. I have other friends who are older and they've named other older people as their power of attorney. And it's like a crapshoot who's going to die first, you don't know.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of hiring professional teams to do this for you. In California, Arizona, they have professional fiduciaries who can do this. They will do the medical part, financial part, all of that. In other areas, you might be looking at independent trustees or trust companies. The problem is you need assets to do that. It's one of those issues when we were designing Childfree Trust, is how to figure out how to make it accessible to people like us, normal people that don't have millions of dollars. And it's a challenge because the system's all built for you got a lot of money, because it's a giant pain. It really is. And when the first step with your parents is to get all their paperwork in place, their power of attorney, estate paperwork, their will, their medical power, financial power of attorney, their trust, whatever. If you can get the assets named in a trust and you're the trustee, banks can't fight you then. You're just managing a trust, not a big deal. But you are a legal fiduciary. These are the trade-offs. But you don't think about it too late. And my nightmare scenario is either your parents don't have paperwork and they're cognitive decline. That's a nightmare. You're now in the guardian world.
Yeah. Or
they have the paperwork, but it's in the safe deposit box. And the safe deposit box has the document that says you can get in the safe deposit box.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a big warning sign in my book about that. Don't put important papers in the safe deposit box.
Yeah, I want you to have a copy on your phone at all times. Because if you get a call at 3:00 in the morning from a hospital, I want you to be able to fax them over a copy, because hospitals still fax.
I have a whole section. There's another step. I have a whole section in my book about naming a beneficiary for your phone. Mm-hmm. Somebody needs to know your phone code. If you're a single adult, somebody else might not know your phone code. And there's a setting inside your settings on your phone, whether you have Apple or Android, where you can name a beneficiary to your phone like you would a financial account. It's called a legacy contact. And if you don't have that legacy contact named and your phone is locked when something happens to you, another person can't break in there. The FBI couldn't break in there. And so you really need, it's a 30-second fix to opening up the keys to your life. You need that phone for so many things when you're trying to help somebody. 2-factor authentication, the apps they were using, you might even just want access to their photos that they had taken throughout their life. You need that phone. If everybody's phone is their life now. And that legacy contact is an important step in that process. Because okay, great, you have a copy on your phone, but what if I can't get into your phone? You need keys to everything.
Yeah, this is why I recommend things like the knockbox for your parents, so you have everything, everything about them. And some parents are like, I don't want to give you the information. I'm like, okay, tell you what, Mom, at least give me a copy of the estate paperwork and then put the rest in this knockbox, put it on your desk where I know where it is. If I have to, I'll fly to your house and get it. I hate that solution, but it's better than not having the paperwork. When we had a family member pass recently, it took me 3 days full time to find all their stuff in their office. Now, and I know what I'm looking for. This is something I talk about, and it took me 3 days. I couldn't imagine where you would start as just somebody who hasn't been in the financial world.
I interviewed somebody for my book, a financial planner whose father died unexpectedly, and she needed his birth certificate. And it was a multi-state journey to try to find his birth certificate. And she found it in a relative's attic, tucked in a bin in an attic inside her father's baby book. That's where she found
I believe it.
If somebody else found a box of files in somebody's garage under a tarp in the back in the bed of a flatbed truck. Come on, I call it the death file. I did a story years ago when I was at Reuters, and this man's father had died, and he didn't know where anything was. He didn't know anything he needed to know. He went to his dad's computer and opened up the desktop. And there was a little Microsoft file folder with death written in capital letters. And he double clicked and everything he needed was in there, or there were directions in there to where to find it. And he was like, oh, thank God. And he turned to his mother and he's like, and now you need to do this because I don't know where any of your stuff is. And we all need something like that. You need to assemble those things and have it. I have it. When I got my estate plan done, the estate lawyer put everything in a little tote bag with his logo on it and his phone number. And I just kept that tote bag on my bookshelf and I stuff everything. Like when you do the legacy contact for your phone, there's a printout. You print it out. It's got a QR code on it. It's like if the person who's the legacy contact just scans that QR code, it gives them the instructions, what they need to do. So I tuck that in there. I tuck my important passwords in there. Any important papers, I just tuck into that canvas tote bag. I tell my kids and my partner, if you need anything ever, if I'm ever sick, that's where it all is. Call the number on the bag. He'll help you out.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, it's Bree. If you haven't already signed up for our newsletter, be sure to get on it, where each week we send out information regarding what's going on in the world of child-free life and finances. You can sign up by finding the link in our description.
Yeah, we call it an I love you file, but I get the concept. We're just trying to be a little nice about it. So I don't know about you, but I was an author and my book came out beginning of this year and I had to have the book to them about 18 months before it printed. Is there some type of time frame for you like that?
Yeah, it had to lock down, about 6 months beforehand. And the world is constantly changing. And I was allowed to break into it to change a few things. But I got advice from Ramit Sethi, who told me his first edition of I Will Teach You to Be Rich included a lot of specific bank and interest rate information. And he totally regretted it. And so when he did the update 10 years later, he learned to write around a lot of those things. And I did that in my book. I was like, this book is very specific to the year that I was caring for my mother. It left open the answers for the future. And even the resources, I had to go into the resource section and take out links that were killed because the new administration came in and I had links to the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Board, and they're dismantling links. And so I had to go in and take stuff out. But the rules are always changing. The thresholds were changing. The estate tax exemption level changes. The Medicaid asset limit changes. All of these things change. And the experience changes. I will say that in The atmosphere that I wrote the book in was one in which, Medicaid was a limited program in terms of availability and access, and Medicare didn't cover, hearing aids and dental and vision. And if Kamala Harris's administration had come in, some of those things might have changed right when the book was coming out, and I wouldn't have been able to update them. But those situations, I think, are only going to go the other way. Like all those costs, the asset limit is just going to get actually lower than $2,000 for Medicaid, not higher than $2,000 somehow. I think that all of the things I said in the book are just going to be harder in the coming years. Medicaid eligibility, banking regulation, fraud protections, long-term care insurance solvency. Like all of those things are just going to be brutal for, the next couple of years. Social Security, you name it, like all of it. It's just going to be for the next couple of years. And then the future is unknown. We have no idea what will happen next.
Yeah, and I wanted to call out the chapter on Medicaid. So this is one of those that I've been researching quite a bit. And Justice and Aging just put out a good report looking at the Medicaid cuts that just happened. And when I say just happened, we're recording this in August of 2025. Who knows? You're listening to this a few years later, it might be a different answer. But one of the things that was interesting as they're laying it out is Medicaid eligibility is going to get cut. The funding is going to get cut heavy. The Medicaid at home programs, which you mentioned, are likely the first to get cut. To the point where, to me, I currently think Medicaid cannot be relied on as a stopgap for both your personal and your family members', safety and security. What do you think about that?
I think that's absolutely the case. I think one fact I came across when I was writing the book that I think a lot of people do not know about is that when you're thinking about a facility that is mixed pay, by which I mean it's got private pay and it also accepts Medicaid. A lot of private pay institutions now will no longer accept Medicaid. And so when you run out of the ability to pay in those in a private pay facility, they want you to leave. And I think more and more of them will not accept Medicaid at all because the payment reimbursement rate is going to go too low. I say in the book, the facility where my grandmother went no longer takes Medicaid at all. She was able to age in place in the assisted living where she was for 12 years because she was able to spend down her assets and then go on Medicaid. And they had a bed for her. And she was charming and lovely, and she negotiated herself a bed in the Medicaid nursing part. That, saved my parents from having to pay for her to have full-time nursing care. And that would have been really expensive for them. But that facility no longer even takes Medicaid. So that wouldn't even be an option there. And then there are facilities, the mixed pay facilities, they all have like a 2 to 4 year buy-in now that a lot of people are not aware of. They want you to commit to paying for 2 to 4 years, sometimes even longer, and maybe those windows will extend before they will think about letting you switch to a Medicaid payment. Somebody needs to have the resources. Now, usually what will happen is you sell your parents' house, they live off of that money to pay down those 2 to 4 years, and then the facility actually helps you transition to Medicaid, and then Medicaid starts paying. But they also did something, one of the things that they did recently was there used to be a Medicaid look back period. So the date you apply to Medicaid is like your day one date. It might take 6 months to a year for your application to be approved, but they will backdate the payments to the facility to that application date. They used to give you 3 months prior to that also, and now they've cut that back to 30 days. Think about it. If you are paying for your parent to be in that facility and it's $12,000 a month, you're suddenly $24,000 less out of your pocket. Like you've got to pay $24,000 more suddenly just because of one little governmental change. That's a lot. That would bankrupt me.
It's huge. And Beth, I'm going to ask you kind of one off the wall question, a little bit out of your book, but I want to see what you think. I introduced Beth and she's a CFP, but she also writes about all different topics. And my advice now to individuals, so, to my clients, Childfree folks, is that you're not ready to retire until you have a plan in place for your long-term care, either self-insure or insurance. You need to have a solution before you retire because that is going to be the biggest single expense in retirement. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I have a long-term care insurance policy. I got it when I was in my 30s. It was like a group work insurance policy. And I was convinced to get it because my mother already had a long-term care insurance policy. And she got that because her brother got sick and my grandfather had Alzheimer's, and she was afraid of what would happen to her. And so she was 50 something when she got a policy. I go through all of the math in my book of what she paid, the exact amounts, the exact amount she got back out, the amount that we were out of pocket on it, like all the math of it that people worry about. Because for some reason, people want there to be a return on investment on long-term care insurance. And I always say to them, at the end of the time you're living in your house, if it hasn't burned down, do you really regret all the money you spent on home insurance? Like they're upset they didn't get sick. They didn't get sick enough in order to use their long-term care insurance, and somehow that makes the long-term care insurance a waste. No, it's for your protection. The most important thing about the long-term care insurance for my mother was that it allowed her the mental leap to get help at home. She was like, I have the long-term care insurance policy. I'm delaying getting help, but if I think I need it and now I have that long-term care insurance, and so I can pay for it. If she didn't have that long-term care insurance, she would have never gotten help. She would have fallen and broken her hip and died 10 years before that. Like the help, it lengthened her life and lengthened her enjoyment of her life. And the long-term care insurance allowed her the mental ability to make that decision. And it allowed me the freedom then of not having to go and take care of her earlier because she was able to pay for the help that she needed. And it started slow, like 4 hours a day, a couple of days a week. And then it ramped up as she needed more. But it was still work that I didn't have to do. And that was important to me. So that long-term care insurance helped our whole family.
Yeah. And the way I look at it, because I've heard people the same kind of question, well, what if I don't use it? My argument is about a third of people die in their sleep and just won't need long-term care ever. The number varies depending on you and your life, but close enough. And I go, hey, if you're in the 1/3 that dies peacefully in your sleep and never needs long-term care, you won.
Yeah.
Like you won the game. And people go, well, I didn't spend the money. I'm like, doesn't matter. Quality of life, you won. And they're like, huh? But they get there eventually.
Hey, Childfree Wealth listeners, it's Bree. If you haven't already signed up for our newsletter, be sure to get on it, where each week we send out information regarding what's going on in the world of child-free life and finances. You can sign up by finding the link in our description.
So, all right, the hardest question for an author, and I'm going to ask you this one and force you to answer it, is if people take one thing away from your book, just one, what would you want them to take away from it?
The whole reason I wrote this book was so that people would understand why. When you get to-do lists, when you get like that checklist mentality, you go on the internet, you search for power of attorney, you get a list of instructions, but nobody ever tells you why. I wrote this book as a story. There's a whole narrative that I went through. And my point was that people understand stories, and that if you read through, and, I know how people read books. I read 1,000 personal finance books. You never stop and do the things that the author has great intentions, like, stop now and think about this. And nobody ever does. I never do. I wanted my book for people to be able to read through, and you get to the end of it and you say, oh, wow, now I understand why I have to do all this. I have to do all this to save whoever is going to clean up after me when I'm gone. The grief and the expense and the time it takes to, turn out the lights and shut the door on the way out. You can't do that for yourself after you're dead, but somebody's going to have to. Like, we're all connected to the grid of civil society, is how I put it in the book. And somebody's got to turn the lights out for you when you're done. You don't want to cause pain to anybody you love. Get your house in order.
Yeah, that's great. And the book comes out in November. So tell us kind of where do we get it and all the details, kind of where to find you. You'll
be able to find it at any major bookseller, and the ebook too. And you can find it through my website. It's just bethpinsker.com. I'm all over the internet, just as my name, on all the social media. And, I write 3 times a week at MarketWatch. So I'm always out there and easy to find. If you have any follow-up questions for me, there's a page on my website to ask me a question, and I'll be answering those questions in blog posts and in video posts.
Yeah, so the book is My Mother's Money, and I'm asking my staff to add it in as a resource. We'll link to it in the notes. But I'm asking my staff to add as a resource for any time our clients are starting to look at this plan for parents, but also for the folks that are trying to figure out their own care plan of what does it take? And what we find is people often, when they're caring for their parents, start thinking about themselves, and this becomes that balancing act. But to me, it's a good guide about what is it like? And until you've been through it, it makes no sense. Once you've been through it, you'll read Beth's book and go, I wish I had this before. You're trying to figure out, how do I deal with Medicaid? And how do I do this? And all of these things. And it's in the book. Pick it up. And we all will have to deal with this in some way. It might be not your parents. It might be a friend. It might be others you're caring for. And we also have to figure out for ourselves. Great book. Great to have you on, Beth. And I appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a rating or review. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Please let us know your thoughts wherever comments are available, or email us at media@childfreewealth.com. To stay up to date, find and follow Childfree Wealth on social media. If you're interested in working with us, learn more by visiting our website, childfreewealth.com. We'll see you next time.